this is like so well ingrained into our company's culture right now, is having the courage to face the consequences of your honesty, right? Like just the whatever it is, put it out there, right? And let's deal with it, right? And so that one thing I really believe has created a very solid foundation in the company where everyone feels so like I can say it, right? Because that level of candor and honesty has become so deeply ingrained in the company. I just think that we have built an amazing culture, not just within ourselves, but with the clients, right?
All right. Hey, everybody. What's up? Welcome to Go Live. I'm your host, Joshua Scott. Guys, first episode of the new year, sitting here in January, getting one in, episode 37, right at the end of the month here. I got a really special guest. Man, we've been talking about doing this for a couple months, but this is Vivek Kinra of PPO Profits, also Verific. We're going to talk, man, all things insurance today, which I'm super stoked about, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. You're the only person who's stoked about talking about insurance. Even I'm not stoked about talking about insurance.
Oh man, it's just part of our world, and love some of the things you're doing. I think you think about it differently, which we're going to get into for sure. But yeah, man, January's almost gone. I don't know if that's like feels fast to you, but I know my family went through like this COVID Christmas where we all kind of got it. I know you guys did too. How's coming out of that, getting into a brand new year? How's it sitting right now?
Yeah, it's funny because we all got COVID at the exact perfect time. Like, my wife got it when the office was closed, kids got it when the schools were closed, and I got it when I was so beat, right? I was like super tired. So I got it. So I'm like, okay, let's take a break, And the weirdest part was I felt really good in January 3rd, which was my first day back. I'm like, okay, this was perfect.
Yeah. So nice. Yeah, it was some of it. I was coming in on that last week of my last work week of the year. And honestly, I thought I was just getting wore out, just trying to get through the end of the year. I was like, man, I'm kind of feeling off, and ended up being that. So it was a good time with us. So it was like, I kind of did the whole quarantine thing because I was like, hey, I'm positive. Don't want the rest of the family to get it. Well, then I come out of it and Joanna gets it. So she's like, hey, I'm going to quarantine, keep the kids safe. Well, then she comes out of it. Well, then my son gets it. So it was like this extended 3-week kind of process that, looking back, was, yeah, we call it COVID Christmas for sure. So good stuff. Well, man, let's, I want to jump into just kind of from the beginning. I mean, let's kind of start there. How did you, because I think it's an interesting question for non-clinical dental professionals. Like, how did you end up in the space?
Yeah, I mean, my wife's a dentist, right? And so she did a startup. At that time, my corporate career, I was a vice president of mobile application development, right? Like prior to dentistry, I was this software nerd, right? Like my career started writing, software for AI robotics, like way back for the military, and then moved into GPS navigation systems, et cetera. So my corporate career has always been on like software and leadership. But I ended up in a job at a very big company. And sometimes what happens with very big companies, everything moves slowly and it's super boring. And I was really just getting bored. And so I would find myself in my corporate meetings, talking to our dental office team members on Slack, right? And so my brain, my heart was everything at like, oh, let's look at what's going on at the dental office. And so I asked my wife if I could quit my job and I believe we can kind of really do some cool things with the dental office. It was a little bit of nervousness, but eventually that's what I did. And then started, doing everything at the dental office, picking up phone calls, scheduling appointments, and right, like treatment presentation. I was the IT, I was the marketing guy. I was doing everything possible, right? And then eventually, when the practice was doing well, right, moved into PPO Profits.
Yeah. Tell me how that came about. Was it just kind of a matter of solving a problem there at the office?
No, it's funny because one of our, the insurance coordinator in the company, right? We used to use a company for billing and et cetera, for claims, a very big company for that, right? And he came one day and he said, this company is not that great. right? Like, I could do it better.
Yeah.
I'm like, really? He's like, yep. I'm like, start a company, right? And so we started a company. He actually ended up moving to Verific because we did an offshoot of verifications into Verific. And then eventually he basically went to the army after COVID, et cetera. So, but that's kind of came about like, okay, if you think you can do it better, let's do it better.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I love it with PPO profits. You kind of use this tagline loosely, friends don't let friends struggle with PPOs. Give me an overview of kind of what you guys built out there, what it does, like why it's so important to a dental practice today.
I mean, first thing, there's so many PPO practices, right? And PPOs just have a very, very bad rap, right?
Yeah.
And so our goal over there is that, hey, you can, completely be in network with PPOs and still be extremely profitable, right? If you do a few things right. Number one, starting with, you got to make sure you've got good fees, because that's in essence the revenue of the business, right? And so it's just like raising the prices. So we started off as a fee negotiation company, right? And most people still know of PPO profits. So it's like, hey, let me negotiate my fees, which is to negotiate with the insurance companies to get better PPO reimbursements.
Yeah.
Since then, we've kind of branched off into having an in-office membership plan for the cash patients, which is a division we call FFS profits. Kudos to my wife for coming up with that name. And then the recently last month, actually, we acquired a claims and billing company, right? Which became the division called RCM profits. So now the idea is for PPO practices that, we want to help you make more and collect more with with lesser stress, right? And everything that goes around to make that happen, are areas that, we're involved with.
Yeah. Yeah. That you're totally right. I mean, gosh, PPOs, I think, have such a bad reputation around dentistry. And I don't know if you've felt this way too, but I think even especially post-COVID, it just seems like for me, I've heard so many practices go, hey, I'm cutting this insurance, or I'm cutting this batch of insurances, and we're moving more fee for service, just becoming more intentional about that. But I think so many of them, it's the perspective of like they're helpless against it. So like but you talk about like negotiating fees, like what type of results do you guys get? Like, how does that process go?
Yeah, I mean, it's a long process of how do you restructure the contracts and what we can typically do. We've been doing it for a little bit, right? We've brought a big volume of dentists to these insurance companies, et cetera, right? So there's a pretty good symbiotic relationship that we have, right, with them. So a combination of those two things, right, we're able to like up their fees significantly, right? Now, I generally always hesitate to throw in percentages because, what it is today, right, and what it is 6 months down the road may not be the same thing. But like 2 years ago, when the environment was really good for negotiating fees, we weren't talking like 3% or 4%. We were talking about 60%, 70%, right?
Yeah.
So very often what we would come back and like, doctor, you're going to get a 60% increase with this thing, right? And it wasn't like, and it was very like, not some hypothetical hyperbolic statements. That became the reality of a lot of people who basically just saw their collections go from 80,000 a month to 110,000 a month, right? It was just such an astronomical increase, right? So no, I don't think we've currently work with over like 1,100 dentists or so. And I don't think we've had a single dentist where we said, can't do anything. It's not worth it for you.
Right. No, and all that top line is just profit at that point too. Just money that wasn't collected in the past. So that's like the beautiful thing about it is very little expense associated with that.
Right? Like there's because, if you were getting $60 for an adult pro fee, right? Like a cleaning, and now you get $95, that $35 is actually take home, profit increase because nothing else changed. Undoubtedly.
Yeah. You and I know you hesitate to throw out numbers, which I love and I value, because we do the same thing. I get practices that are like, how many new patients can I expect to get? I'm like, come on, man, it's such there's so many factors and variables in that. But what do you think most PPO practices are being underpaid as a percentage?
Ooh. Oh man, way majority. I mean, it's like, underpaid is a relative term, right? Because it's one of those things where I think every dentist believes they're underpaid for whatever reason, right? Like, and so I don't know even if insurances have like a, hey, this is what should get paid, right?
Yeah.
But almost pretty much everyone that ever reaches out to us, right? When we take a look at the reimbursements, I'm always like, doctor, you should be higher. You should be doing better. Let's make that happen. It's very,
Yeah.
very rare when I come across someone who's like, everything's good.
Yeah. Yeah. What I I don't know. It's interesting just kind of knowing you from afar. I mean, you and I met in Jamaica, delivering
Right.
WOW first event, Nissa Holmes in Jamaica. It was actually
Right.
you, Joanna, and Michael Arias sat down for dinner. I think it might have been that first night we were in the country.
That's right.
And I think we were following each other on social, but that was kind of the first time we had met. And just kind of watching you from afar and some of this, it seems interesting that your career seems surrounded by making PPO practices profitable and work,
Right.
for dental practices. Has that been kind of intentional? Like at some point, did you kind of realize there's a lane here and I'm going to focus in that, or has it just been an evolution?
Evolution, right? Initially, when we started, right, and my general belief is, right, that what looks intentional 3 years down the road was just a series of things that happened, right? And then you later on add intention to it, which is what we've done now, right?
Yeah.
But initially, it was just like, hey, I didn't know that there's a business out there, right? And oh wow, you know what? I can get paid to do this. What I just did for our office for others, that's awesome, right? And then it just kind of like snowball from there to say, okay, this is a true service that has a high need. Let's make sure we get our word out there, etc. Right? And then eventually, I don't, from Verific came out of PPO profits, right? It used to be part of the service. And then we realized that insurance verification is such a rudimentary part right now that there needs to be some software sophistication over there, right?
Yeah.
So it came from there. And then, over time, eventually, as the business grows, right, there's more cash flow and all that stuff. And you're like, okay, what's next? Because we have a really big team. And part of it also comes from, I have a young, ambitious team, right? Like, so it's not very often. In fact, I remember Michael Arias asked me this question on a podcast, like, hey, have you ever thought about like just chill now, right? Like, hey, everything can just be the same. I'm like, I'm actually happy with that, right? But when you have a young, ambitious team, they also want to move forward, right? And the only way they move forward is if I create the opportunities, right, that they can step into. Otherwise, what's going to happen is after a couple of years, like, and this is a dead end job. I'm going to move somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of it is like, hey, how do I create opportunities for the folks that are there? And we've got a reasonably sized team, so they need to find their next, just like for all of us, right? Like we look at it, okay, what's next, right? People in their careers are also looking at what's next. And so then now it has been somewhat intentional. Actually, I wouldn't even say somewhat. Now it's become extremely intentional. And the whole thing about, PPO practices has become like very laser focused, right? To a point where when even folks from within our own team say, hey, we can do this, right? I'm like, no, this is our lane. We're going to drive super fast in this lane first, before we go somewhere else.
Yeah. Gosh, I can relate to that on so many levels. Does that what you were talking about, having to stay up, like staying ahead of the team, creating opportunities, does that feel burdensome to you? Is that heavy? How do you kind of rationalize that?
It's a great, awesome, man. It's an amazing question. I like, no, it doesn't feel burdensome one bit. And when I look at, just kind of myself, I've become very like, take the next step, don't think too much in advance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my brain just goes, all right, let me take the next step. Let's see where it lands, right? And if things work out, which, the reality is, if you think about, right, like if you go somewhere with good intention, with good people, with good strategy, right, there's a higher probability that things will work out. So we take the next step and we're like, okay, we're onto something over here. Let's now take the next step, right? So I've never thought about it as like a burdensome thing, right? I kind of view it as life is short enough where it's like, let's take the next step and see what happens, right?
Yeah.
And so my mental thing is like, we can do that. Let's go ahead, see where it goes. And I don't think more beyond that, right? I don't let it burden me. Neither do I like think so far ahead where it's like I put pressure on myself where it says, okay, I've got to get there. If I don't meet these goals, literally, I'm like, all right, take the next step. We'll find where the next step goes from there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's such a fun conversation because you're right. When you work with great people, especially like we're in the creative space, and creatives are kind of their whole nother world unto their own. And it's, yeah, keeping them engaged. And sometimes if I look too far ahead, I feel that pressure, and that's probably like what you're talking about is if I'm going in 10 years, how do we innovate enough that everybody on the team, highly talented creatives, still find dental marketing engaging, right? But at the same time, it's just like, it's those little steps. It's like this year, like we know a couple fun things we're doing that are going to really kind of push that. And the next year there will be those again, and the year after, and you just kind of take it. And so, yeah, it's probably more of an iteration than anything.
Yeah. And I'll, on that topic, I'll just add this, right? Like I remember in late 2020, I started thinking, all right, let me be a little bit more intentional. I'm a CEO of a company. I'm supposed to have a strategic plan and all that stuff, right? So I wrote down in 2021, literally 7 bullet points of the things that I would like to achieve, right? That's it. Like, hey, these are the 7 things. And I thought 2021, we didn't do anything, right? I'm like, man, we're lazy, right? Didn't do anything. And no joke, I now then went to modify that document to create a 2020 strategic plan. Yeah. And I'm looking at it. Every single bullet point is checked. Yeah. We did a reorganization that I was thinking because we had grown too much, did that. In-office membership plan. We have our RCM profits for claims processing. I'm looking at that. I'm like, geez, we did a lot. I just, going through that thing. So yeah.
Yeah. It's, one of the things I have done the last couple of years is because you start to get in this role where there's just so much coming at you. And I can look at my week and be like, man, I've got like 15 things to do this week. And one of the things I've done is I've actually got this like card kind of organizational system that sits on my desk. And this week it's got a lot on it. It's got like 6 on it, but usually it's got 4. And I just look at my week and I'm like, what are the top 4 things that I need to get done? Like the most productive, high value things. But what's crazy is like, I stash these and I'll look back over like 3 months and I'm sorting through them and I'm like, oh my gosh, got through so much stuff. But in a week, 4 things just seems like nothing, to be honest, but you're right. Like you look back over that long term and you're like, wow, got done a ton.
So, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
What are the things I kind of like about you that I think is interesting is a lot of your projects, and I could be completely wrong on this, right? Because this is just my perception, but a lot of your projects seem to kind of fly under the radar. Like I don't think most people would realize like how good size of an operation PPO Profits is. Like if they realize that, they would probably be like, whoa, that was not what I was thinking. Is that kind of an intentional play on your part, or is that just something that's kind of just the road you guys have gone down?
Yeah, I mean, it's just recent that I realized that we're flying so under the radar, right? And because a lot of people will still call me and they think, oh, hey, Vivek, can you negotiate this for us, right? And in their minds, I'm this solo consultant for that, right?
Right.
And I'm like, no, doctor, actually, right? Like there's 14 account managers in the company, and the company's total 36 people, right? There's a process, right? Like I get involved when I'm really needed, right? But there's a talented team. So that's kind of and same thing with Verific, right? I mean, it's gotten a pretty big operation. There's 6 software developers working on this team, et cetera, right? And so there's both these operations and, in terms of like number of clients and the number of verifications, it sometimes surprises me, right? Like I look at that, I'm like, whoa, we're doing, this many thousands of verifications every month.
Yeah.
How, when, what happened, right? And so like it's now one of those things where, maybe it's time for us to not fly under the radar so much and at least have a, and I don't know if it's important or not, right? But at least it'll be maybe it's just one of those things that maybe we need to like start focusing a little bit on our brand, that the
Yeah.
companies are very established and et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so you're on to your next project, Verific, which everybody can see kind of behind you there, the dual kind of complementary projects. Where did that idea come from originally?
Yeah, so the somewhat of an evolution of ideas, right? Dental insurance verification is just a very painful problem, right? Still, it's just very, very antiquated, right? So it was something that was a need for us, right? And so we were outsourcing insurance verifications, right? And so we're like, hey, we've got a good system going on, right? And at that time, we were very singularly focused on this practice management software called Open Dental that's become really popular, right? And so we're like, we can kind of, again, turn it into a business and do it for a lot of other folks, right? Then one of my clients is a dentist whose husband is a software developer, right? And then he came on board as a business partner and a CTO, right? And then he was like on his own side writing some additional software for what we were doing to connect to his practice management software. His name is Dharmesh DJs, really, really good guy. And so he's like, Vivek, I can do this for the clients. I'm like, cool, right? Yeah. So again, one thing led to another, and now all of a sudden we became a software operation. And then some of the algorithm that we're building honestly happened after COVID, right? Because after COVID, we had like completely shut down, right? Like if you think about it, there is no verification if there are no patients going to a dentist, right?
Yeah.
Some of the software companies, right, that were on a monthly recurring revenue were still okay, right? Everybody gave some breaks, but generally they could like, okay, I'm a Yappy, I'm getting some software, they're still utilizing the software, or at least have it, right? For us, we went to near zero, other than some emergencies here and there, right? Like we had to let go everybody, right? And so I remember DJ, and without giving too much into what we're working on it, he came up with something. It's like, well, how about we do this for the community and we give this to them, etc. Right? Like, and then all of a sudden, the spark came from there. It's like, wait, we can do X, right? And so then from there, we're like, you know what? Let's do this. Let's go full on in that, raise some funds. We had to wait because, of course, Verific had gone down all the way to, near zero. So we had to make sure that, this COVID thing isn't like a 3-year lasting thing, right? Yeah. And so once the thing started coming back, there was a lot of traction all of a sudden, because as dental offices were coming back, there was no staff. Right. So they were outsourcing all of this stuff, and we still feel it today, right? Yep. And so what ended up happening is that our revenue and the business health all of a sudden became really good and on a very good trajectory that also allowed us to raise money, right? And thanks to you as well, right? You're an investor in Verific, because the business was already healthy enough that it wasn't like a pre-revenue startup with an idea. Right. There was already a lot of stuff cooked. There was a lot of demand, et cetera. And yeah, it's just one of those things where, sometimes you take the next step, and, a lot of the folks, the investors like Mark Costas, who's a board member, and, the entire DSN team, et cetera, right, who became investors, what they probably don't know. And, the pitch deck that I had written, right, was on the plane to DSI to Arizona, right? Yeah. Literally, I was on the plane and putting it together, and where we presented the pitch deck, it was really, again, a matter of like, hey, we've got something that we want to show you. So yeah, a lot of it is just a series of small steps that happen because we're finding ourselves in a place to say, hey, we're onto something, right? Yeah. And now we know, or generally believe, we're onto something very big with Verific, right? Like, so.
Yeah. You've kind of got these ways you talk about the company, but with Verific, you say friends don't let friends waste time verifying insurance. And yet this is happening all over the country. How much, like if I ask you this question, how much potential productivity is wasted in a PPO practice verifying insurance? How would you answer that?
Oh yeah, one full-time equivalent employee for one dental office, right? I mean, that is
Right.
such a, because we, like, there's so many people that interview to become part of Verific, et cetera, as well, right? Like that's all I do,
Yeah.
right? Like my job is to pick up the phone, call the insurance, stay on hold for 40 minutes, and then punch in the numbers, right, of what they're telling me. And so I would probably say maybe like 3/4 to one full-time equivalent employee in the dental office is the productivity that is being wasted. It's like wild.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I think I loved about this the most, because it was always in the back of my head that I think this was one of the biggest just issues in a dental practice from a waste standpoint. I've always thought that, always seen that. There just never seemed to be like I don't know. I think it's been there so long. We've all just been like, yeah, but that's just how it is. So when you came around, I was like, yeah, this is the most annoying, wasteful piece of a dental practice. And it just seems like common sense. Like, it's the year 2022. Why do we not have a solution for this? Right. And some of that's been because of insurance and how they've forced it to handle it. But we've all just kind of gone along, and here you come in with a solution like, but we could do it like this. And as you mentioned, full disclosure, I'm an investor in the company. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity and bringing that to me. It just made a ton of sense. Why do you think we've yet to have seen a real, like, competent solution for this?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a combination of reasons. Number one is, if you think about it, dentistry, it's really only about 5 years ago where I believe dentistry became sophisticated, right? Like when I started, right, at the dental, which was about in 2017 or maybe a little bit earlier, right? Pretty much just there wasn't a good sophisticated solution for anything in the dental office. I thought Yappy was like up there with the paperless solution, right? But that was still in 2016, 2017, right? And so part of it is because, dentistry is probably the only business in the country that is non-corporatized right now, right? Because if you think about it, the business model of dentistry is a solo dentist opening their practice, and every dentist at some point of time opening their practice, right? The only other parallel I found is maybe like law practices where there's like 2 or 3 people become partners and form an entity, right? But outside of that, I don't know, like pharmacies were like that, but now it's all Walgreens, right? It's all corporate, and they've got corporate structure, et cetera. So because of that, nobody literally had, I think, enough money, right? Because some of these solutions takes millions and millions of dollars and often require private equity help, et cetera, right? And I just think that a lot of the private equity and the venture funds and all that stuff that are typically very often the drivers of this type of innovation just were, figuring out the medical problem, right? Like there's this, it's just a way bigger market in the medical world. And I think it's only now around like 2015, 2016, where there's all of a sudden many people going, we need a software solution for this, right?
Yeah.
And they just started going with the easier problems, like let's do paperless forms, right? Let's send a review reminder. Let's remind them of their upcoming appointment, et cetera, right? And then one of the problem I think that just got left behind up until maybe a couple of years ago is, hey, the insurance verification is taking so long, right? And yeah, it's just one of those things that I'm a software developer by degree and then in training, et cetera. And when all you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? Like, so, for me, like everything is a software solution, right? And so, I just think it was a matter of like private equity, because of the type of business, there was never enough money chasing these problems, which they are now.
Yeah. Gosh, I think that's actually a really great perspective. That's been completely congruent with my, like, what I've noticed here, even in the past 5 years, right? Like we've seen it all. We've seen the private equity come into group practices for sure, and the consolidation and multiples of EBITDA and what they're doing there, but it's also coming into the dental professional space as well. And the same thing is happening. And now there's like the private equity that makes some of these projects the investment opportunities, the acquisitions that make these projects worthwhile for sure. It's what I think is really interesting about this. I would love to get your take, but for me, it was like, okay, so let's say you've got one person on the team, the majority of their time is spent verifying insurance, $45,000, $60,000 salary, whatever that is. You can replace that for the most part with a service like this. I think you got one or two options. One is you can run the office leaner with less team members, potentially, maybe not replace the entire person, maybe half, maybe consolidate some other stuff, however that works. The other thing is, I think now you've got an opportunity to invest in some other areas of the practice. I think of areas that have been underserved in dental practices because you're just so busy keeping up with patient flow, like maybe even HR, like clinical training, like even marketing, having somebody in the office that plays more of a role in it. How do you see a service like this? Like, let's say it becomes standard of business to outsource and have automation like this. How do you see that affecting a practice long-term?
Just like what you said, I think it saves the people so much administrative money, which is so pointless, right? Like, yeah. And as you know, just like in the United States as a country, the admin cost of healthcare are the highest in the world, right? By a huge degree, right? Yeah. And so the idea is, of course, the admin cost doesn't really go into like making treatment better at all, right? Like one bit. Right. And so if we can basically save like, 90% of that in the FTE that was working on getting all this stuff done, like, just like you said, I mean, there's just so much additional opportunity that is getting wasted, whether it's just like marketing, right? Like it's for a dental practice perspective, right? This cost is a pure cost that adds almost no value to what their operations are. Yep. This person literally could be handing out postcards to people somewhere about, hey, come check out our dental office, which is a greater value than what they're doing today, right? Mm-hmm. And so if I look at even our office, now we outsource everything to a Verific already, right? Like our dental office, but which in essence saves our front office people the time to do this, but then there's, much, much better, customer service, right? Like, and a lot of little things, like it's rare that we come across a dental office and the front office people say, I don't have anything to do. They're just, right. Typically there's so many things to do, but they're picking out the insurance verification piece of it the most because, hey, I've got a patient coming in next hour. I got to figure out what percentage the root canal is covered at, right? Yeah. So when you leave it there, there's enough things on the dental office, front office plate that they need to be pulling out.
Yeah. Dude, I love this because there's so many things that get added into a dental practice at our expense, right? Like even just technology and supplies and different, whatever, from the weekend CE course. This is, you can look at it like an expense, but you could also look at it like this expense creates this much potential. And how are you going to leverage that? Because I think you can leverage it to grow the practice and get, instead of something that was like, this person was a managerial expense, like their salary to go track this money down. I'm like, keep the person, but now let's take that income or that salary, let's leverage that to get a 4x return on it. Whether that's in some places like you said, marketing, whether that's in the patient experience, like let's map that out and choreograph that better and more intentional. Let's invest in, doctors invest in CE all the time. Let's invest in higher clinical excellence for our team. And what does that look like? And somebody taking the point on that. So I'm like, yeah, you may have like 40 to 60 grand as an expense that's always been there managerially, but now you've got a chance to use that as an investment, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah.
So
totally agree.
Obviously these companies are very complementary, and I sense you've kind of got this lane that you guys are going down. Any other ideas kind of down the road that you're thinking of that you want to share?
At some point of time, right, I feel that what would be very helpful for a dental practice is where everything related to money is handled outside, because it also removes things like embezzlement, right? Which is a very common practice, right? Like, I mean, there's a statistic out there that at some point of time, over 50% of the practices have been embezzled from.
Yeah.
It used to be so common in the past when you would get cash payments, right? Because you could basically say, I gave this patient a discount of 50% off because, they were really upset, and the remaining, but you didn't give a discount and the $50 gets pocketed. This was happening to my wife, right? Not at our office, but at one of the places where she was an associate, right? So the idea is that, okay, what can we do so I don't have to worry about, I want for the doctor to work really well clinically, and I want the front office team to focus so much on like a patient experience and making sure that the patients are following through on their treatment that was presented, et cetera, that everything about money is handled, which, can include reconciliation, right? Which can include things like making sure that there is some stuff created for preventing embezzlement, because it's auto reconciling what the reports say over here and what QuickBooks is saying that your bank has received, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
So there's definitely a desire to just continue to coming up with some products and services that basically make it very automated. Like even right now for our own dental office, we have a weekly report that our office manager sends that says, the credit card in Open Dental says we got, X thousands of dollars, right? And here's the credit card report that I pulled, that matches or does not match, or if it doesn't match, what's going on, right? But a lot of it has APIs, so you can automate it, right? So that it's all built in to say, hey, whatever I'm producing the maximum because I've got really good reimbursements. I've got a really good cash membership structure. Everything is functioning. I'm collecting everything possible, right? And my bank and these reports are telling me that whatever that we are producing is actually going into my bank account, right? Which is the full cycle. So at some point of time, we always want to get there, one thing at a time,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love that you're kind of taking away this excuse of you can't run a profitable PPO practice anymore, because I hear that a lot. And so I love what you're doing with that. What's obviously like running these companies and kind of being thrust in this role of CEO, and not just one, but now two companies. What's been some of the biggest challenges for you personally?
I mean, first of all, time management is the number one thing for me, right? And not only because it's challenging to manage time as a CEO of one company, let alone two, but also because by default, I'm a poor time manager, right? Like I don't have good discipline, right, in life, which is a very weird trait for a CEO of a company to have, because when you look at CEOs, they are, like kind of like epitomes of discipline, right? And I don't, right? And in fact, I was having a one-on-one conversation with Mark, and I was kind of just bearing my soul out to him, like, Mark, I have like no discipline, right? But the one thing that I have is a lot of self-awareness about myself, right? And I've lived enough life and I've tried enough things where some weaknesses I've been able to mask, some weaknesses I've been able to, overcome, and some weaknesses I've given up on them, and now I have to work my life around them, right? And so time management has been like the worst thing. The good thing is that my director of operations at PPO Profits, who was the first employee at PPO Profits, who, no joke, it's a story in itself, but she used to come and cook and clean at our place, right? And today she is the director of operations and somewhat my business mentor when it comes to organization. So she's helped me a lot. So I used to have weekly mentorship sessions with her where I would be like, Natalie, help me out here. And then she would literally draw out, the next step for me. And then, one of the things she did is somewhat like block scheduling, saying, these are the days you work on Verific. These are the days you work on PPO Profits. This is the day, right? So everything has become very calendar driven.
Yeah.
And then the thing that I've kind of still learned about myself, that I have poor reliability, right? Like I probably am the least reliable person in the company. Again, the good thing is that because I'm fairly self-aware and because I'm also really well aware of my strengths, I focus my time on what is my strength, which is building business and all that stuff, and coming up with the strategy and the products and the processes, right? So it's one of those things where, we have a very, very amazing culture that's been driven in the company about very candid, open conversation, right? And one of the things is, hey guys, my discipline is lacking. If you need something for me to do, book a meeting with me, right? And I'll do it live real time, right? And so while it's inefficient because now I'm also using their time to come on a meeting, the good thing is they prepare everything very contextually for me when I'm looking at it on screen share, and I'm able to do it right there and it gets done. So that's kind of how, right? So yeah, time management for me has always been a problem. I also tend to like take on just too much, right? And I generally, you know, just one of those things where my brain gets impatient and like, what's taking so long, right? And so I do have a tendency to kind of like try to, try to pull the thing a little faster than it should go, right? So probably those two things I've definitely struggled with.
What do you, I love your level of self-awareness for sure, which I think is probably a really important trait for leadership in a company. What do you think, like, what are your uniques? Like, what do you bring that has been an asset to the company?
Yeah, I would say two things, right? Like and I'm not just saying this is like so well ingrained into our company's culture right now, is I always talk about having the courage to face the consequences of your honesty, right? Like just whatever it is, put it out there, right? And let's deal with it, right? And so that one thing I really believe has created a very solid foundation in the company where everyone feels so like, I can say it, right? And if they make a mistake, there is no like reservation, right? And I don't say to them that if you make a mistake, there's no cost to it. Sometimes there are consequences. All I'm asking you is face it with courage, right? I'm not saying that there's no mistake that cannot be forgiven. There's some mistakes that are going to be really critical and may require and terminate, and maybe may lead to termination of your job if that's critical. I'm saying take it with courage, right? Yeah. That's okay. Life doesn't end because your job ends. You continue to take that to the next place in your, right? It's never happened. And however has happened is because that level of candor and honesty has become so deeply ingrained in the company. I just think that we have built an amazing culture, not just within ourselves, but with the clients, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody in the company tries to have this ego and defense mechanism and blaming somebody else. In fact, there was a case recently where one of my employees just forgot to submit a Delta dental application, which is a huge thing for a dentist, until they reached out 3-4 months down the road, delaying them by another 3 to 4 months. It's a huge mistake. It's a huge problem. Right? And this person just sent an email to the doctor saying, "Doctor, I'm really sorry. I just missed sending it. I'm going to take care of it." Calls me up and was like, "This is what happened." Right. And I sent an email to the doctor. I'm like, "Well, set up a meeting." Right. We set up a meeting. And of course, I'm like, "Doctor, I don't want to blame Delta Dental." Right. Because we could have. This is on us. How do we make it right? Just tell me. Right. We feel terrible. And one of the things I said to the doctor, I'm like, "You know what, the person who made this mistake, one thing I'm actually honestly really happy about, that this person, I don't want to say he or she to give up, who it is, right? Like this person could have, said, I faxed it to Delta and, they, it's very easy for us. I would not have never known. Forget about you.
Right.
But I'm glad that, and it wasn't like a, hey, don't do it because you can get in trouble legally and all that stuff. I'm sorry, tell me what we need to do. And she was like, this is so I was thinking, I came in with, my boxing gloves on, right, to fight you guys on some of this stuff, right? And I just appreciate the sincerity, right? Please take care of it. No worries. I appreciate everything. The doctor then became a client of Verific and sends us so many different clients for PPO profits, right? So I think this has become very deeply ingrained into our culture of, just face it, right? No matter what happens, we'll deal with it, right? And the other thing is just communication, right? We have become amazing at, and the way I describe communication is being able to verbalize the accurate snapshot of reality. No, you're not trying to do something. Just what we know in our brain, has it come out of your mouth or has it been typed up? Exactly the way it is, with all the gotchas, caveats, if then else statements, right? And those two things I think have really, really helped us as a company.
Say that again. Communication is verbalizing the accurate
snapshot of reality. Like this is reality right now, right? And being able to make sure you're not projecting what is going to happen in the future, et cetera, right? You're not extrapolating anything. This is how the situation is today, right? Yeah. Which could include your take on what should be in the future, right? But take that snapshot of things are in moment in time and make sure that you're able to verbalize it, right? So,
I love that, man. I've always kind of had this saying, because I think leaders, they're supposed to be visionaries, right? They're supposed to look down the road. They're supposed to hype things up and get people excited and bought in and all that. But I've always had this saying where the leader's number one responsibility is defining reality. And because I think like vision detached from reality is rarely helpful, but the number one job is going, this is what reality is. Now, this is what we see or what we're forecasting. And I've worked with some of my leadership team on that too, of, like, oh yeah, like we're going to get all this done or this is going to happen. I'm like, at some point it will, but reality is like, what about this week, this month? Like, where's our things at right now? And it's a huge, so I love that. I appreciate that. And dude, that probably is what even some of that is probably what even drew me to working with you guys and being a partner with this, is because I think if you would have come at me with this pitch deck that was like, Josh, got the best opportunity, it's going crazy, it's blowing up, this is and just hyped it, like, that's not my love language at all. It's basically like, here's the problem we're seeing, here's what we're doing to solve it, here's what things look like, here's what we think they could look like. And I was like, yeah, man, that's very accurate, like realistic projection. So I connected with that right away.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man.
Yeah, no, man, it was funny. Actually, yesterday I got an email it just came in kind of through our incoming lead sources, but the email said, I need to talk to your most experienced salesperson right away. I've got 50 to 100 practices to send you. And so I just don't like that. Immediately turns me off. Because A, I'm like, it's probably spam. He's just trying to get my attention. B, it's like, it's not going to turn into anything. So I responded with, hey, like, yeah, great. Let's answer a couple of these questions for me. Like, how'd you hear about us? What are you looking for specifically? And then he shot back like, this is frustrating. I'd just prefer to get on the phone. And I'm kind of like, hey, basically like, I've got so much business, I'm doing you a favor of even like getting on the phone with you. And I'm kind of just like, bro, I disconnect from that approach so much. But
and that brings me like maybe the 1/3 core tenet of that's really deep culturally, both in the company and me personally, is like fairness and consistency, right? Like every single decision to me just goes right into that. Is it fair? Is it consistent? Right? And so that's one of the reasons why literally we give no discounts to anyone, right? Not because we can't or something like that. And sometimes, there's startup doctors like, look, I'm just getting started and all that stuff. But it feels very unfair to the dentist to me who paid full price, right? Because he didn't ask. And, we said, this is the X, and they're like, yep, here it is, right? So now we're like, and so we get a lot of folks saying, oh man, this company is cheaper, match their price, right? Well, but we have 20 other dentists who've paid this price. How can I look at anybody in the eye and say, yeah, it was fair to them, they just never asked? That's not a good thing, right? And same thing with, sometimes it happens, right? Where it's like, hey, I've got 20 practices, right? And so it's one of the same things where it's like, yeah, doctor, I just want you to know whether you have one practice, right, or 20, what's going to happen is the person right now that has one practice may have 20 in the future. The person who has 20 today may have 10 in the future. We don't keep track of that. Every single person that comes through this follows the exact same channel, follows the exact same structure, right? And we don't bend beyond that, right? And if it doesn't work, that's fine. But, and so that has helped probably, like, again, internally and externally, where all the decisions get driven by, is it consistent, right?
Yeah.
And one very good example, I just thought that happened recently. We, have raised our fees significantly over the time, and in 2022 we raised our fees again, right? And then we did a little bit of an analysis about how X service was structured and why. And we thought, well, the Y service should cost more, right? And so we said, you know what, let's increase the cost of Y by $600. And we had just increased the cost of X by $600. And we said, you know what, let's put it back to what it was for 2021. Seems fairer to me, right? And so, but we already had over a period of 3 weeks, a lot of people who had paid the extra fees, right? And we're like, you know what, contact them, refund them the $600 for everyone, right? Because it doesn't feel fair that they got caught in this 3-week period. And I don't want ever one person to say, wait, I paid this, you started after me and you paid less. It doesn't make sense, right? So even though it's like, okay, nobody's asking for us, right? The whole idea of like fairness and consistency, really, really allows to make really, really good decisions, so.
Yeah. It keeps your systems cleaner for sure. And it kind of establishes this lattice work of like how your team members can make decisions because they know how it goes. We're sitting here at the start of, I got a couple more questions for you, like 2 more. We're sitting here at the start of 2022. What are you looking forward to most this year?
So from a professional standpoint, right, the launch of Verific Plus, which is the coming up iteration, right? I think I'm hopeful that the biggest thing that happens professionally in my life is that Verific Plus becomes, household name, as in like it's in, everybody knows Verific Plus, right?
Yeah.
That's probably like something that is going to become like is the most professionally. Personally, I don't know, man. I just probably want to have always, I tell myself every year that I'm going to start working out more, eating better, right? And I really hope that I stay true to that. I've had a good start, right? And so one of the things I want to make sure is that, I find myself, by the end of the year where I'm like fitter and, more energetic, mentally clearer.
Yeah. Well, I know it's tough to build that in, man, but you get to the end of that year and you also notice that you're a different CEO because of it as well, your energy level and mental sharpness and all that. So it's, to be honest, that's why I do it. It's like I feel like it's my superpower, rejuvenation, right? Like when I have weeks where I'm working out 3 or 4 times, I would go to CrossFit. I'm just a better leader because of it. So, that's why that's really one of the main reasons I built it into my routine. But man, look, I appreciate you being here with me today. It was fun just catching up to you. I know there's not enough time to even just do that in life. We've been connecting over the past couple of months around this, but I just enjoyed hanging out with you today. It's last question here. It's Friday. It's Friday night, end of a long week, man. Where are you at? What are you eating? What are you drinking? Like, what's your Friday nights look like?
Ooh, man, Friday nights, like it's largely, me and my wife talk about like date nights all the time, right? And so very often it doesn't happen for some reason or the other, but typically will at least, somewhat over time become homebodies, right? 2 young kids would do that to you, right?
Yeah.
And then it's largely like putting on some shows and chilling out, right? But this weekend is my daughter's 6-year-old party, so her family's coming over and all that stuff. So this is going to be a pretty busy week. They're coming over tonight, and then of course doing a lot of things in preparation for leaving for India. That I'm doing this Tuesday. So packing and all that stuff. Pretty boring weekends.
You guys have like a go-to kind of just normal Friday night meal as a family?
No, it's whatever. We have someone that basically comes every day to like prepare some meals and all that stuff. So it's up to her. Whatever she makes, we eat. Like one of those things. Users make. It's like,
yeah. Totally understand, man. Well, look, I appreciate you being here. If people want to reach out to you and find out more about any of these services, where are the best places that connect with you or learn more?
Yeah, so I like my avatar lives in the Facebook metaverse, right? So I'm always there, right? So Facebook is probably like one, place where you can literally private message me and I'll put some links over about what you're looking for, right? But ultimately the websites are ppoprofits.com. And when you go there, it'll basically give you the calls to action about whatever you're looking for. And then verific.biz, the BIZ, right? And each of them will have a way for you to register for, a demo or the next steps or a consult, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, guys, if you're running a PPO practice, there's probably some better ways you can do that. And Vivek has got some great solutions there. So definitely check it out and reach out to him. So, man, appreciate it. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy your trip to India. We'll catch up when you get back. You're going to be at the actually Chicago Midwinter and Hinman too. Is that right?
Yeah. Are you guys there?
No, we will not be there. But yeah, if anybody out there, man, stop by, check out the booth, say hi, learn more about what you guys are doing.
Right. And you guys are helping design the booths and all that stuff. So I'm definitely looking forward to that as well.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, man. Well, thanks for being here.
See
ya.